Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this Meet the Candidates event. We're happy to be joined today by David Young, who's running for the 2nd Congressional District in the state of Iowa. The 3rd Congressional District in the state of Iowa. So we're very excited to have him here with us. He's running against Congresswoman Cindy Axne, who will have this afternoon at 4:15 p.m. join us. So thank you, David, very much for being here with us today.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
And it's good to see your face again. Like I said, we were reminiscing a little bit before. I always enjoyed working with you when you were in the Congress before. So thanks again for being here today.
We'll do it again.
Yeah. Well, before we get started, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today for the call. We've done a few of these. This has been a really good resource that we've been able to provide our members, and we thank you all for being so actively engaged and participating on these. We thank everyone who will watch the recording as well. We know this is a really important and great resource to the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce members. Public policy is one of our anchor tenants of the entire chamber, and we'll continue to provide these resources as we go into the election, even though we are only 8 days out. So with that, I will turn it over to David Young to give us a little bit of an update. I know you're going hard right now, as I mentioned, with it being 8 days from the election. So we're excited to hear what you're hearing about and talking about with Iowans.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Drew. And it's great to be with you again. And I hope that we continue this relationship over the next 2 years at least. And so I'm David Young, born and raised here in Iowa's 3rd District in Van Meter in Dallas County, where I live today, and graduated from high school and college, Drake University here in the district. My first jobs were here in the 3rd District. And then before I served Congress in 2014 for a term, and then 2016 for another term, 2 terms altogether, I was Senator Grassley's Chief of Staff. And so got a pretty good up close view of the federal government and Congress and what's doable and not doable during certain times. And so we've had some great successes when I was a member, especially I'm thinking about the 2017, that tax relief that just helped give us one of the greatest economies this world has ever seen, and certainly one of the greatest ones that we've seen here in the country in the past 60, 70 years. And so it brought, rates down for individuals. It really helped small businesses. It doubled the child tax credit. And it set forth a policy of just the philosophy of allowing people and businesses to keep more of their hard-earned dollars because you know better how to spend it, reinvesting in a business, and people, workers, know how to better spend it on their families. And so that's my philosophy when it comes to economics, allow people to keep more of their hard-earned dollars. Also on the regulatory front, we cut a lot of rules and regulations, not just for the sake of cutting them, but because they're outdated or the one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. And so when it comes to regulations, you want to make sure that they're really tailored. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and that those who they affect, those people, those small businesses, larger employers, they're at the table so Congress doesn't screw things up, and they've screwed things up. And so, we've got a real interesting time going on right now. 2020 is not over yet, but we'll get through it. We've gotten through many other kind of crises and tough times here in our country. And we're coming out of this economic malaise that we suffered through from the pandemic. But there's still more relief that needs to happen. We need to make sure that we get another COVID relief package here, really targeting a lot of those small businesses, especially that didn't qualify maybe for some of the relief in the first round, and making sure that the unemployment issue is dealt with in a way where we make sure that we're not harming people or harming people by, not allowing them to go out and find a job and keeping them on something where they shouldn't be necessarily. We want to make sure that we are getting people to work. So that's a big priority for me, as well as making sure that the pandemic itself, the virus, that we chase those therapies or we get that vaccine, and that if this ever happens again, we really learn from what happened, and we better come out of this together. And we are in this together. It's not a Republican, Democrat, urban, rural issue. We are Iowans, and we got to get through this together. We've done it before. We can do it again. And so, the race goes on 8 days. The marathon is turning to a sprint. And so no sleep for me until about midnight on November 3rd, or the morning of November 4th, maybe. But, we're all anxious to get this over with so we can get our TV and our radios back. But I've had a great relationship with the district, the chambers, and there goes my map. Did you see that? I'm okay. I'm going to make it. And so I look forward to continue that relationship again. With that, I'll make sure the ceiling doesn't fall down, and we go on.
Well, thank you, David. We appreciate you providing those remarks and providing some context from your time in Congress before, and then also things that obviously as we move forward for some important issues. So one question we have from the group already is, how will you work to bridge the gap between party lines if reelected to the U.S. Congress?
Well, like I've done before, I have a record of working across party lines. I'm thinking about the bills that I got put into law to help the veterans by helping to fix the Veterans Crisis Line, or bring call quality to our rural areas, or the Safe Agriculture Food Act. Reaching across the aisle, you really got to look at a lot of districts that are similar to the 3rd district, and some of those are represented by Democrats, and that's okay. And we all have the same interests, and we just join hands and we push forward. And so I think a lot of it is tone and work ethic, and not being one of those characters on the left or the right who's screaming on Fox or CNN, because nobody wants to work with those people. They're not invited to the table solutions. And when you're not invited to the table solutions, you're not only kind of put off, but your whole district then is not being represented. And I want to make sure that I never leave this district behind or embarrass this district in any way. So just getting in there, finding commonality, and hard work ethic. And, we have that in Iowa, of course, and doing your best just to get it through the finish line, and being very creative as well.
Well, thank you, David. And just as a reminder to attendees, if you do have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. We'll be monitoring those questions via the chat box, and I'll make sure they're asked to David. The next question that we have is, what are the top issue or issues that you feel Iowa is facing, and how will you address them if reelected to the U.S. Congress?
Yeah, well, first of all, probably this pandemic, right? And the mix between getting the economy up and going where it was 8 months ago, right? We knew how we got there with low taxes, low regulations, and as much certainty as we could give employers, entrepreneurs, investors, workers. And so I want to make sure that tax relief from 2017 is made permanent. It's a 10-year tax relief bill. It was 10 years because of reconciliation rules. I won't get into that. That's all process stuff. But we have to make sure that we make it permanent. And so then years and years on out, people can make those decisions with their businesses, entrepreneurs, investors as well. I want to make sure that we are making sure we have trade agreements. I know our president doesn't like multilateral agreements. Okay, well then let's go after those bilateral agreements, specifically with those countries that were wrapped into that Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement that President Obama put together. We need to start really reaching out and pushing for those bilateral agreements with those countries. It's great for our exports. It's good for our workers. It's good for our economy. It's also good foreign policy. Get in there, get great relationships with those countries who are especially under the umbrella. They're right under China. And if you want to take on China in another creative way, develop better trading relationships with those countries that are under their China's sphere and influence. And making sure that we keep a tab on rules and regulations. I want to bring transparency to the regulatory process. When you put your name on a business, people know who you are and where to go. When I introduce a bill or an amendment, my name's on it. But regulations, when they're put out there, we don't know who writes them. So I have a piece of legislation that I introduced in Congress. I hope to build momentum on it. That says whoever writes rules and regulations, they have to write their name on it. And when you put your name on something, you're going to offer a better product because people know where to go if they don't like it. So those are, a couple of the big issues: getting our economy up and running again, allowing people to keep more of their hard-earned dollars, creating markets, and at the same time, those quality of life issues when it comes to healthcare, and education. Education for me is primarily a local issue. There are some federal dollars that flow, but I want those decisions to be made at the most local level, from K through 12 through help for our skilled labor as well. for apprenticeships and those certificates of need for those jobs out there that we need more of. And healthcare, especially, people's are worried about the cost of healthcare. The Affordable Care Act has some good things in it. I'd like to help fix that law and also bring some new things to the table, such as price transparency, to make sure that we know what we're paying for and we don't have that surprise billing. And also, I'd like to give those subsidies that go to those 44,000 Iowans on the Affordable Care Act, instead of those going to the insurance companies, then down to those people. I want to take the insurance companies out of it and make those subsidies go right to the people who are on the Affordable Care Act, so they are empowered with their healthcare dollars, so they can make better decisions about their healthcare and be savvier consumers and hold healthcare providers accountable with price transparency. Just a few of the issues that I'm hearing about.
Thank you, David. Those are definitely some timely and pertinent issues that I know we hear about from our members, and we appreciate that. We have a couple questions in the chat box. We'll start with the first one from Donna Pritchard, and it's, do you think term limits of 12 years for Congress would be a good idea? And if so, how can we get it done?
It may be a good idea. I just know this, that I'm not going to self-impose a term on myself unilaterally while all the other members of Congress aren't term limited. If I do that, then people in the administration, the bureaucracy, colleagues in the House and Senate will look at me and say, well, that 3rd district representative will be gone soon, so no reason to pay attention to that person or the issues important to their district. And so if it happens, it has to happen collectively with an amendment to the Constitution in both the Senate and the House. And so it's come up for a vote before, probably in the 90s, I think. Every once in a while it comes up again. But I think we do ultimately have term limits, and that's at the ballot box, and giving people the freedom to vote in again or vote out their member of Congress. I was term limited, so it can happen.
Yeah, it certainly can. Yeah, like they say, bring your voice to the ballot box, and that obviously is one of the best ways to make things, to make any changes or things along those lines, if you are someone that's so inclined to like the idea of term limits. We have our next question from Chad Hannon, who works at Ameristar Casino, and he's also on the Council Bluffs City Council. What suggestion or plan would you propose to help local governments close the infrastructure funding gap? Council Bluffs is at least 25 years behind on infrastructure replacement, and our residents simply cannot afford tax increases that it would take to catch up and stay ahead.
Yeah, well, I think we need two things. One, we need a comprehensive infrastructure plan that goes beyond just the importance of course, roads and bridges, but making sure that our electrical grid is secure, broadband, making sure our waterways are clear, our dams and our levees. I would like to bring more power back to the appropriations process, where members of Congress were able to congressionally direct spending out of appropriations bills to their districts. Some people call them earmarks. They have been abused, but I think if you can put some real guardrails around that congressionally directed spending between a member and the people in their district, they can come up with a pretty good agreement about what's not abusive and what's good for the public at large. And so we got rid of earmarks about 8 years ago. And since then, that money has been controlled by bureaucrats at different departments and agencies who've never been to Council Bluffs, who've never been to Iowa, who's probably never been to the Midwest. And what do they really know about our needs here? And so I want to take that power away from the bureaucracy and bring it back to Congress, where members with accountability, because you put your name on it, know where that important infrastructure spending is going. There's accountability there, and it's just going to be a better use of taxpayer dollars, because that agreement between the people and their member of Congress, you know, it's going to go for the right thing, and there won't be abuses when you put your name on it.
And thanks for bringing that issue up, David. I know, for example, some people forget about earmarks, but for example, that road we have out by the airport in Council Bluffs, that was an earmark. There's very effective and good uses of those. And I know you were very effective, not only in working with Senator Grassley's office, but then obviously earmarks were gone in your time in the Appropriations Committee, but you were very creative in the Appropriations Committee in helping make sure you brought money back to Iowa.
Yeah, I truly believe that if we would have earmarks the last 8 years, that some of the flooding problems up and down the Missouri on both sides of the river could have been dealt with in a real, substantive, and effective manner.
Thank you again. Our next question comes from Keith Jones with Edward Jones, and he would like to know what your efforts are to support ensuring Social Security benefits are preserved for current and future generations.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. A very important question. And it seems about this time of year, every 2 years, this issue of Social Security and Medicare is demagogued, and that there's ads out there against candidates about threatening Social Security and Medicare. Nobody wants to take Social Security and Medicare away. I've not met anybody, not on the ground here in Iowa or in Congress. Now, our actuaries at Social Security Administration and in Medicare say that we need to make sure that it's fully funded, because at certain years out, your people are going to only get so much of their benefits. And so we need to make sure it's whole and it's strengthened. And so it has to be, one, a bipartisan effort. You cannot have a partisan solution on this issue. It's got to be between both parties. And we saw that. Ronald Reagan, a Republican, Tip O'Neill, a Democrat from Boston, he was Speaker of the House. There was an issue in the 80s regarding solvency, and they came together and they fixed it for decades out. And so we're back in that same place again. Now, bipartisan and a transparent process. You have to make sure that this is done in the light, not behind closed doors, whether it be on the floor of the House and Senate or in a committee in full view of the people. Even take it out on the road like a Lincoln Douglas style debate to make sure that people are educated on the issue and people are involved in the solutions process. And so that promise has to be kept. I wouldn't do anything to change any kind of benefits for those receiving it right now, Social Security, Medicare, or baby boomers right now. I think there are ways to strengthen it. I think probably the issues that will come together in a bipartisan way will be maybe looking at lifting the cap or means testing, but not taking away any kind of benefits from those who really need it. And so I think those who are in the higher echelons of earning have all but said, they can afford the lifestyle they have on their own. And this is a way for them maybe to give a little bit back to their fellow citizens through means testing.
Thank you, David. Our next question comes from Superintendent Eric Nost with Lewis Central Community School District. How do you plan to support public education going forward? Thank you again for your time for us as well, he says.
Yeah. Well, one of the big ways is to make sure that the decision-making is made by you, by your teachers, your administrators, your school board, and your parents. I don't want to have some kind of chokehold of power of the classroom in our school districts in Washington, D.C. You know your parents and your teachers and your students the best. And so I am fine with federal dollars continuing to flow to our classrooms. I just want to make sure there's not a lot of control of it and mandates at the federal level. What's interesting is we all have the same goal of making sure that we have strong schools and we graduate kids who are smart and go out there and go get it and then support their local schools. And so if you remember No Child Left Behind, that law that was passed by, I think it was Ted Kennedy, a Democrat in the Senate, and John Boehner, a Republican in the House, and George W. Bush was our president. It was supposed to be the cure-all for any kind of educational woes, and it was a disaster. And the good thing is that Democrats and Republicans, teachers, administrators, parents, and students realized that it was a disaster. And so we came together and we repealed that in my first term in Congress. And so unfortunately, some of our schools and kids suffered over the time that there was No Child Left Behind, but we got rid of that and gave more power to our classrooms. So power to the classrooms and our schools, but money flowing without federal mandates.
The next question we have regards workforce development. That's something that our employers and our members consider issue number one. What are you hearing when you're out campaigning, but then also what are your ideas to do some creative problem solving for the issue of workforce development?
Well, some of the problem solving has been when I was able to get right into high schools and talk to kids before they decided that they wanted to go to a four-year college or not. Not everybody's wired for a four-year college. You can still wear the Iowa State or Iowa or Drake or UNI or even Nebraska sweatshirt and be a big fan without going there. But there's some great jobs out there for the skilled workforce. There's a lot of need for it. And it's a good return on your investment for the kids who go out and say, you know what, I'm out of high school. I don't want all these college loan bills. I want to work in a kind of a team spirit. I want to create things. And so getting those kids early and telling them about the opportunities to go get a welding degree and make $80,000 to $100,000 in less than a few years without all the student loans. And so just really pushing, verbally communicating to kids. They do get a lot of pressure from their parents, but these kids are becoming an adult, and it's time for them to take part and take grasp in their future. When I was on the House Appropriations Committee, making sure that Department of Labor received the funds that they needed for grants and help with the skilled workforce. That was very, very important to me and very, very important to Iowans, and that's why I advocated for it. And of course, as we, strengthen the economy, we'll recognize that we need more and more of those jobs, and just making sure that the kids know about it in high school.
And when you look at the people who are on this call, obviously you have some key stakeholders here in the Council Bluffs, Potawatomi County, and Southwest Iowa community. Can you talk a little bit about how you'll engage business and community and institutional leaders, especially, obviously being a chamber, our business members, if reelected?
You bet. It's the same way that I've done before, and that is to make sure that I'm in your community and I'm talking to anybody and everybody who allow me to get in front of them or who wants to talk. And so one of the first priorities I made when I ran for Congress, I promised to go to every county every month. And so there are 16 counties in this 3rd district. And so I went to every county every month for 4 years, engaging with individuals, groups of all backgrounds. Some were partisan groups, some were not. But for the most part, people were just Iowans looking for a level playing field, an opportunity to chase the American dream. And so touring a lot of manufacturing plants, talking to associations, going to chamber lunches like I've done in Council Bluffs, and also having an opportunity when issues come up before Congress, specifically in the Appropriations Committee, to know how those accounts affect Iowans, and whether or not there's a need for maybe more funding, or if there's a regulation that is overdue and has become a one-size-fits-all, which hurts Iowans. Just listening and then leading on those issues, and always having an open door policy, regardless of political party, regardless of where you're at in the district. I'd be a representative, and I was a representative for everybody.
Another issue, obviously, that's really important to all of Iowa, but, obviously here in Southwest Iowa, we have SIRE, Southwest Iowa Renewable Energy, and we have a lot of individuals, working in that renewable energy and renewable chemical production in that space. Can you talk a little bit about the opportunities you see and how you as a member of Congress could be helpful in pushing renewable energy and renewable chemicals and just renewables in general?
Yeah, so you're on offense and you're on defense on this issue. One, making sure that we are pushing trade agreements where we can export renewable fuels, our biofuels and ethanol, making sure that the EPA is abiding by the law. And I wish that they would do this. I'm disturbed that this administration's EPA director has been dragging his feet, and it seems like this EPA director is more favorable to the fossil fuels industry. And listen, I don't want to get rid of fossil fuels. I think we need to have an all of the above strategy when it comes to energy policy across the board. Wind energy, solar energy, geothermal, biofuels, hydro, nuclear, coal, gas. I mean, all of the above strategy, but making sure that there's a level playing field. And so continuing to push the administration to make sure that they're not giving out waivers to small refineries that don't deserve them. And so I was the first in the delegation at the time from Iowa to introduce legislation bringing transparency to that waiver process. And so that's very, very important. And also pushing for funds in agriculture on the Appropriations Committee, which I did for research, finding new ways to use what God gave us, these renewables, to fuel our economy and feed the world.
And another big topic that you touched on earlier, but we haven't talked about since, is trade. Obviously we've had a lot of, trade agreements and, trade transitions in trade with USMCA and some of the things we're seeing, in the EU and UK and Japan. And you mentioned the TPP countries. Can you talk a little bit more about trade as well? Because that's obviously so important for us, not only in Iowa, but here in Council Bluffs and Southwest Iowa.
Right. So our manufacturing, other products and services, agriculture goods, we make the best here because we have the best workers. And God gave us some really good land here as well, here in the Midwest. And so making sure that our trade agreements are fair. And as time goes by, technologies change, demands change, products come to light in a new way. And so making sure that we're always looking at our trade agreements to make sure that as time goes by, we're getting the best deal. And so the president did that with NAFTA. And in the end, I think it helped us in some ways with Canada and Mexico, making sure that we keep the foot on the throat of China. That may seem cruel, but they're an adversary, and sometimes they're an enemy. And we need each other, and we need to make sure that they hold true to the trade agreements out there that we have with them here with Phase 1, and making sure that we combine forces with our allies as well in Europe and other parts of the world to make sure that they are holding China accountable just as well. And so pushing for updated and new agreements with other countries is a priority for me. And also, on the House Appropriations Committee, on the Agriculture Subcommittee, there's some key accounts there for foreign market developments and those kind of things to make sure that our products are marketed in other countries, those products that need help, that can't do it themselves. There's some programs there to help market those. And I want to make sure that those are always fully funded.
When you look at the future moving forward, obviously 2020 has been kind of a crazy year, but what do you see as the biggest opportunity for the state of Iowa and the nation going forward as you go around and you do your campaigning and you envision what that may look like?
Yeah. Well, we learned something interesting from the pandemic, and that is that we are back to China. We are too reliable on China, or it could have been any other country, for those, life-saving products that we need, whether it be medicines, antibiotics, personal protective equipment, masks, or ventilators. And there's an opportunity to bring that back home, that manufacturing back home to America. And we in Iowa can be at the forefront on that. We've got the workforce, we've got the skills, we can make that right here. And so I think that's very, very important that we recognize that, to keep Iowa at the forefront of our manufacturing and just the whole spirit of helping one another here at home if there's a crisis. Again, just new products, from our agricultural products. It's amazing some of the things. Who would ever thought that we could be putting this biofuels in the tank of a car or truck and fuel them down the highway? So making sure that we are going to the next level, the next generation of biofuels, I think is very, very important.
And we're at just past 10 o'clock now, so I want to honor your time and others as we were scheduled. So the last question I have for you is, what are some of the last things you want everyone on the call here to know about you going into Election Day?
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, it was a pleasure to work for Iowa for 4 years. My race is not a grudge match against my opponent. It's not personal. It is about making sure that we have leadership in Washington, D.C., and I don't believe that we've seen it from the 3rd District these last few years. And so we need to do that. We just saw a failure of this last COVID relief package that was pretty important to a lot of folks in Iowa. And we need somebody who will get in there and be a problem solver and find a compromised middle ground like I've done before on issues and get it across the finish line. I want to make sure that regarding healthcare, that people know that everybody in Iowa, everybody in the country, they support people with pre-existing conditions to make sure that they're not discriminated against by insurance companies by accepting them with a policy or not, or pricing them differently. A lot of commercials out there. There's a lot out there saying that some, quite frankly, lies and mistruths about my record on pre-existing conditions. There are 2 people in this race right now for the 3rd District who have introduced and passed legislation to protect people with pre-existing conditions. And it was my amendment with a few of my colleagues when it came to the Republican bill. And we made sure that people were protected who had pre-existing conditions. I've got an uncle with MS, with diabetes who've lost 2 legs, an aunt with MS. I've lost 2 cousins from cancer. I'm fighting every day, whether I'm in office or not in office, to make sure that they get the health care that they need and they're not discriminated against. And I'll do that continually for your family as well. And so we need leadership right now more than ever. And whether it was President Obama or President Trump, I worked with both administrations. It doesn't matter the D or R behind the name. We're all in this together. And I had a reputation, and still do, of reaching across the aisle to make sure that it just got done. Compromise is not a dirty word to me. It doesn't mean you're selling out your soul or your principles or your values. It just means that you may not get everything you want. Maybe you only get 70% of the 100% that you want. Well, you take it and you go forward. Sometimes it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust to get down that football field. And the other thing is, I'll show up to work. In 4 years, I never missed a vote. In 4 years, I went to every county every month. And so my opponent and I are different on that issue. But listen, you know as well as I know that elections are important. They're consequential. I think this is a big one for many different reasons. And part of it is whether or not we remain true to the ideals and principles of our founders and remain a republic, or if we try something different that the other side is bringing to the field, which has failed in so many places around the world. And so I'm about free markets, capitalism, freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I know that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce endorsed my opponent. The U.S. Chamber only endorses incumbents. But I will say that my opponent got a 70% rating from the Chamber, and I have a lifetime rating of 90%. And I'll just leave you with that. And I appreciate everybody's consideration of support on November 3rd. And it's great to be with you.
Well, thank you, David. It's always good to see you. Too bad it couldn't be in person, but I've always enjoyed our conversations, and it was so great to see you, even though it was via Zoom. And thank you for taking the time to be with us and our members today. And best of luck to you these last 8 days.
I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye-bye.